Joining us now to help us make sense of these developments is Ray Powell, a maritime security expert. Hi, thanks for joining us again. Good to see you.
Hey, it's good to see you again. How are you?
All right, Ray, let's get right to it. Given that it's the first few weeks of January and we're seeing action of China against our fishermen and 41 vessels in the area, what do you make of this strategy that China is doing at the early part of the year?
Well, I'm not sure that 41 vessels it's not a historic high or anything. So it's, what we have seen over the last year is an intensification of its presence, especially around places like Scarborough Shoal and Sabina Shoal. And so that was not something that was the case, say, a couple of years ago. But we're seeing that its vessel swarms are coming closer to the Philippine coast than they used to.
All right. Well, given what is happening right now, and we've spoken a number of times last year, we've seen how China has escalated or its strategy. Now, how would you then assess the balance the Philippines and its allies has shown with regard to escalation or deterrence, for the matter? Are we striking a good balance, or are we unintentionally making things worse?
Look, in fact, it's interesting. We just had this discussion. I'm at a conference here in Hawaii, and we have a couple of your senior officials here as well. And we had this exact discussion because the question is, one person's deterrence is another person's provocation.
That's right.
And a habit that China has is to express everything as a provocation. So if a Philippine fishing boat goes near Scarborough Shoal, that's a provocation for China.
Okay.
And so what they're trying to do, I think as we've talked about before, this is what we would just call gaslighting. They're trying to get you to rethink everything you know about what provocation is. So their version of provocation is you came into a place you used to come into all the time. Whereas you look at what they're doing and you're saying, look, you are harassing our fishing boats, you are water cannoning our BFAR vessels. That's not provocation. So, what China is trying to do is it's trying to sort of redefine what makes a provocation so that you won't do it anymore.
I wanna ask you about this because I read this article of yours. You said you've previously described China's approach in the West Philippine Sea as an asymmetrical or gray zone strategy using Coast Guard and maritime militia rather than outright naval force. Now, with the Philippines Navy now reporting 41 Chinese vessels, how do we distinguish between numerical presence and actual operational control at the sea? And where do you think we are now?
Well, so what China has done is to use what is not a military force, but what we would call a paramilitary force. So it's essentially, it acts like a military force, but they get to sort of have the excuse that these are not gray-hulled PLA Navy vessels, right? So that way, if the Philippines sends out a vessel of a similar size, like a Navy vessel, they can say, the Philippines is escalating. But, the fact is, as you're showing there on your screen, they have some extremely large Coast Guard ships that don't do traditional Coast Guard things. They are built to assert their sovereignty. And so by employing this maritime paramilitary, they are attacking this problem asymmetrically. They know that the Philippines, and actually almost no country, has a symmetrical response to this.
So, Ray, what do we have to watch out for then? For sure, I don't think we should take a look closely at the legal side of this because China would not go down that avenue, and they're now under gray zone, using gray zone tactics. They're increasing their military posture. So, what is the critical thing that we should take a look at? Is it gray zone? Is it the posturing of China? What are the signs that we should be wary about?
I would say if there's a thing that sort of keeps me up at night is I would be concerned that someday we would see actual reclamation activity at Bajo de Masinloc, that we would see something that indicated they were planning to actually build something there. And I feel pretty confident in my heart of hearts that there's been some communication back and forth between Washington and Beijing that they should not do that, right? That this would be a game changer. Again, I don't have any inside knowledge there, but I would be surprised if there wasn't that kind of communication, because that really would be a game changer to see China. We've seen what they can do if they decide to reclaim an island and then put, an airfield on it. Having something like that at Bajo de Masinloc would be a real existential threat, I think, to the Philippines.
So, what are the realistic options that the Philippines has? I mean, we've definitely, at the point, at least from the perspective of the citizens, are maxing out our diplomatic channels. So, what can we do now? Should we engage in gray zone tactics?
Angelo, I'm going to say the same thing I keep saying over and over, and you're going to get tired of me. You're playing the long game, right? You have to think in terms of what the Philippines has to do is to build capacity in order to present a realistic deterrent. And you've heard Secretary Teodoro talk about this.
Yes,
the Philippines has to have a credible deterrent. It has to have something that's going to make China stop and pause. Now, it does have one big thing, which is, of course, an alliance with the United States, and it's building partnerships with a lot of other countries. And that's important in terms of building a deterrent. But of course, the Philippines needs to have its own deterrent, its own, naval force and Coast Guard that can begin to, make China pause and think, maybe this isn't going to be as easy as it was. And I actually think that the Philippines is making some substantial progress toward that end, but it's just going to take a while.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've used the term gaslighting to describe how China frames this maritime incidents over and over again. Now, my question here is, how dangerous is this narrative battle compared to the physical one?
Well, it really is China's primary strategy. What China wants to do is it wants to get the Philippines over time to just give up and say, look, begin to buy into this idea that everything the Philippines does is the provocation. That why can't the Philippines just be quiet and let China have these parts of the sea, which, well, why are they so important anyway? And maybe China does have historical rights over them. Over time, they are trying to get the Philippines to change its thinking. And it doesn't actually matter so much to China if the majority of the Filipinos think so. If they can just get enough of the Philippine elites, the political elites, the business elites, the cultural elites to buy into this, and then they figure they can just kind of bring the rest of them along over time. So understanding that China actually does not want to go to war with the Philippines or the United States or even Taiwan, I don't think. Ultimately, what they want is they want their competitors to give up and just let them have it.
It's interesting you mentioned China is looking at a buy-in from some of the elites that we have. Are they also taking a look at a possible Sara Duterte presidency? Is that something at the back of their minds?
Look, I am not going there. You got to keep me out of domestic politics, brother. I don't want to.
That's true.
Well, listen. What I will say is they've got a very sophisticated political strategy, and they will use any lever available to them. And you've seen recently documentation of them very much targeting Mandarin-speaking Filipinos, and through the Mandarin language press, we've seen some really shocking things coming out of outlets like Chinatown TV and United News, these Mandarin-speaking or Mandarin language press that are very much targeting Mandarin-speaking Filipinos, most of whom are very patriotic. They are not the enemy. But there are some number that they are trying very hard to change their thinking. And I think that, Filipinos should be angry, not at those people necessarily, although I'm sure some of them are not innocent, but for the most part should be angry at the way that a hostile foreign power is targeting their kababayan. Just because they're Chinese Filipino doesn't mean that they get to be owned by Beijing.
But in your own point of view, Philippines' decision to release real-time documentation and videos with on what's happening in the West Philippine Sea is a good strategy?
Look, I mentioned that I was at this conference. We were talking about that today with some very senior leaders from around the region. A lot of people are looking at this strategy as one of the most innovative counter gray zone strategies that at least we've ever seen in this theater. and trying to figure out what it means to countries like the United States and Japan and South Korea and Australia and other countries who are active in this theater. It's a high-risk strategy, right? Because it takes on China's narrative warfare, and China, of course, doesn't like that, and so they're going to punish the transgressor, in this case, the Philippines. What the Philippines has got out of it, this, while taking on this risk, is building all of that national resilience against this kind of narrative warfare and building a ton of international support by showing itself to be clearly in the right. And boy, those things really come out at events like the one I'm at right now.
Well, we don't have much time, but thank you so much for your time and insights, of course. Maritime security expert Raymond Powell. Thank you for joining us.
Great to see you. Thank you.